My guests today are writer-director Peter Klausner and actor Jon Lee Richardson and the eerie and emotionally charged short film Stomach It. Now, Peter Klausner has worked with his close friend, long-term cinematographer Emily Tapanes, where her credits include The Morning Show, as well as The Man on the Inside and The Sex Lives of College Girls. And Peter also worked with his good friend and editor, Liam Molina, whose credits include Fallout, Chief of War, and The Mosquito Coast Season 2. Now, Jon Lee Richardson is an actor known for his roles in Beverly Hills Cop Axel F., Bug, and I Met My Murderer Online. And Jon is currently studying at the Groundlings and creates weekly sketch comedy content with his wife, Vanessa. Now, Stomach It is Peter's fourth short film. A crime scene cleaner struggles with emotionally detaching from the deceased personal possessions. While on a late night job, he convinces himself a monstrous presence is toying with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome writer, director Peter Klausner and actor Jon Lee Richardson to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Glad to be here.
Peter, I want to kick this off with you because I love this film. And where did you get the idea to write a screenplay about those who clean up crime scenes?
So I started reading about crime scene cleaning, and I had never heard of that before as a profession. And I started researching crime scene cleaning companies around the world, ones based out of, ones in California, Mexico, Australia, literally all over the world. And the thing that really intrigued me was they all had the same basic qualification for the job, which is you have to have a strong stomach. And I found that to be a very visceral just idea. So from there I interviewed crime scene cleaners. I went on Reddit, and I'd never been on Reddit. I found a subreddit for crime scene cleaners, and I messaged crime scene cleaners and interviewed them. And I mainly was interested in kind of the psychological effects or the tolls of the job. And then from there, I connected with a crime scene cleaner who's based out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Spoke to him on the phone a few times and just got to really just understand the job as best as I could, essentially. And the thing that was interesting to me about the whole idea of a strong stomach was it gave me the idea for a character who essentially struggles with that basic qualification. This is someone who has a damaged or just hurt stomach, someone who's not cut out for the job. And it made me also think about anxiety, about how people can feel anxiety in their stomachs, and about the whole brain gut relationship. And it's made me think about a personal fear of mine, which is if you internalize something over time and you keep internalizing it, how that can manifest in really unhealthy ways.
Yeah, and you portray this perfectly in this film. And when I watched this film, it brought memories back to me because my father back in the 1960s and the 70s was a funeral director, but that was back in the day when funeral homes in small towns also housed the ambulance service. So
Mm-hmm.
if you weren't dealing with a funeral, you were driving the ambulance to emergencies because those are the days where there were no paramedics.
Right.
And so growing up, he would never talk about the things he saw.
Right.
And then you bring up talking to a crime scene cleaner in Louisiana. And my
Mm-hmm.
father actually was sent to Louisiana during the time when Hurricane Carla and Hurricane Camille, they were monstrous storms and killed tons of people. The only thing he ever mentioned to me about being there was standing on the roofs of those houses filling up body bags. And then that's all he would ever say. So
Right.
I really I understood this film in a much different way. And even with the different crime scenes in this movie, I remember when I was in college and had this apartment, and the guy downstairs blew his brains out,
Oh, wow.
and and actually heard it happen.
Oh
And
my God.
So this film just brings a lot of that for me kind of back to life. And you've already answered my question about the fact that you did spend a lot of time researching and interviewing a lot of these people. Now, did a lot of these crime scene cleaners, did they kind of share some of their crime scene stories with you?
Yes, I heard a lot of different stories. And the thing that started to intrigue me was this idea of, how crime scene cleaners are forced to emotionally detach to do their job. And it's similar to what you were saying about, paramedics, it's like you were saying your father had to emotionally detach, it sounds like. So it's like paramedics, coroners, surgeons, crime scene investigators. It's like you're constantly surrounded by trauma and death, and to do your job, you have to emotionally detach, essentially. And yeah, the thing that stuck with me was I heard these kind of anecdotes about the personal remnants that crime scene cleaners would kind of find in apartments, such as a final meal, like a pot filled with macaroni and cheese, and maybe there was a homicide after, or maybe like a child passed away and there's like a Capri Sun left behind, like a bloody Capri Sun, just like these personal remnants that are left behind. And that really kind of influenced the short, because it made me realize that that's almost that, or at least that seemed to be the toughest part of the job. It wasn't really like the blood or the guts of it. It was more of the personal aspects that are left behind at crime scenes, and how, similar to this character, it's like, you crime scene cleaners, or this character, you go into a crime scene, you see something like a toy horse, or a magnet on the fridge, something personal like that, or a rubber ducky at an overdose, and you think about the deceased, and you think about the fact that that child will never be able to use that toy horse again, or just, yeah. And I found that very interesting, and I kind of based the short around that theme of emotional detachment, and how, this short is really just about a guy who struggles with emotionally detaching. And it's like, as he's starting to mentally spiral, it's like his subconscious is forcing him to emotionally detach, is forcing him to emotionally attach, essentially. It's like he's doing all these things to emotionally detach, like turn photos around trash bag, bulletin boards, all do anything he can to not visualize the deceased. But yeah, I always viewed it in a psychological way of, yeah, his subconscious is forcing him to acknowledge and visualize something that he wants to ignore.
And this is what I loved about this film. There's only one character in the whole film, and it's like a psychological thriller with one person.
Right.
And the psychological part is with the only person in the film. And John, that is you. So first, how did you get the part to play this character, Joel?
Well, Peter and I had worked before on a short and had a lot of fun doing it. That was through an official audition process. And a very different thing. It was more comedic. It was kind of more a dramedy vibe. This one, I was fortunate enough that, Peter and I are friends now, and early on we got to be talking about it while it was still in development. And Peter said, I've been writing this, and I just am picturing you playing it. Can you come be part of, let's bounce ideas off each other and develop this together? And so it was really a rare chance to be shaping the character before the script is even finalized, and having that influence the script. And it kind of became this really cool kind of thing where we were in sync, going back and forth and adding to each other's ideas. And Yeah, and it just kind of built from there. But it gave me this basis for the character of real emotion. We talked early on about the circumstances that led up to Joel working this job that he's clearly not a fit for, and relationships, all kinds of complex themes that really you don't even see on camera, but from an acting standpoint, are very necessary to give it this like depth and gravitas that it needs to have.
The realism here was you. And the reason I say that is because normally, if I've seen a movie or maybe some streaming series where there is a cleanup person, They're usually very seasoned. They're much older.
Hmm.
They're hardened. It's
Yeah.
like
Right.
they go into the scene and it's just like, yeah, whatever, just give me a mop, and then they just do
Hmm.
the job and they don't think twice about it.
Hmm.
Um, but you're cast into this role, which you come across as you've been doing it for a little while, but you've never
Hmm.
really learned how to completely detach yourself
Yeah.
from this type of job. So it continues to eat at you. What was the biggest thing about this role that interested you in wanting to do it?
Um, there's something really cool about working on playing detachment in a way where the emotions are provoked in kind of, it's like going through the back door. I don't know if you've heard the actors, trick of like when a character's supposed to cry or whatever, don't focus on crying, never focus on pushing an emotion. But if you focus on the character really trying to hold it together, really trying to not let a tear come out, we have this weird way that we're programmed where you often have the inverse of whatever you're trying to manipulate. So early on, kind of like Joel, I started focusing on as an actor, no, 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 I don't need to like feel tension and have this spiral. um I can't make myself do that, you know what I mean? It would be manipulated, but I can work on, no, don't feel anything. Nope, this person in this photo. Nope, 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 this is just a job. Like really really going home on like trying to hold it together. And it's wild, but it had a yeah, it brought me to life, along with some awesome music that we would listen to get into character, and then just a lot of good conversations with Peter. Peter's an awesome director to work with, and we would have moments on set where we'd get inspiration and ideas, and he'd just come kind of probably mysterious to everyone else and whisper something in my ear that just like, okay, I'm gonna play on that, like, and it was all so deep. He knew what to say in order to feed in with the story that we'd already developed together. So he could say something about my mom or something that it isn't even a character in this whole thing, and it meant something to me. So yeah, what's not to love? It's also my first time doing horror, and so getting to like just go whew, like all the way in on that is just, it's kind of an actor's dream.
Well,
So
you bring something up because I think it was Michael Caine, and I don't know if it was another actor or it was one of the famous acting coaches that brought up the fact is, and I've had a director tell me, he said, you don't ever tell the actor do this emotion. You tell them to either think about what their character would do or bring up a memory from your past that would evoke that type of emotion. And Michael Caine would be
mm-hmm.
like, and I thought Anthony Hopkins said the same thing. If you want to cry on camera, the best thing to do is try not to.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the audience feels you trying to hold it in, but still, even if it's one tear that comes down the face, it speaks volumes in that role.
Right.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah,
Now, for either one of
absolutely.
you, yeah, I mean, for either one of you, do you think you could actually handle a job like a crime scene cleaner?
No way. No,
Absolutely.
not any
No.
better, not any better than Joel did. No.
No. Um, I wanted to say too, just to go back to what you said about why it's the whole casting process with John. I was interested in John because John is in his early 30s, but he has a very young, kind of innocent look to him. And to me, I was interested in that and kind of putting some scruff on his face. And I was interested in the idea of this is a character who used to be happy. And essentially, I think it would have been really easy to cast someone who just looks creepy because it's a horror short, and I think you could have just cast a creepy looking person. But yeah, I was really interested in that notion of this is someone who should not be doing the job, but his face, it's someone who used to be happy. It's this kind of hardened look over a very like innocent, young looking face.
And I agree because I noticed that there's an innocence in John, or I should say, the innocence in Joel, the character.
Right.
He shouldn't be doing this job. And he's the type that's never going to get used to it. You know, some
Right.
people do a job that they absolutely do not like because at that moment in time in their life, maybe it's the only job they know they could get. And then they're not sure if they could ever get out of it. And
Right.
the other part of it is too, Peter, is that you brought John in again, the perfect actor for this role. And I think the innocence plays the biggest part in this, but
Right.
he also on camera shows that vulnerability of someone that shouldn't be doing this job at all. And he's he's literally a sponge because he's now soaking in all of this horror, this heartache, this sadness, the end of life, because that's where he's going to the end. And he struggles emotionally because one of the scenes that I kept replaying is that one scene where he goes in and he starts either he's taking the pictures off the wall, he's putting trash bags over the mirrors, anything he could find to
Right.
not see these things as he's supposed to be there cleaning it up.
Right.
That signified to me that that was symbolic in him trying to block it out of his mind.
Right. Yeah, that totally is what it is. And it's interesting because I came up with that visual way of emotionally detaching for the character, like you said, to turn photos around or trash bag, bulletin boards or mirrors. And when I was talking to the crime scene cleaner out of Louisiana, coincidentally, he said that when he used to be on the job, now he's usually in the office now, but when he was out on jobs before his cleaners would come in, he would go into crime scenes, and before his cleaners would come in, he would go into crime scenes and he would turn all the photos around of the deceased. So that was a really interesting coincidence, but that just made me think about, okay, I'm like, we're on the right track where this idea is applicable to this real job. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if it would have been anybody, I mean anybody who was a crime scene cleaner, I would probably suspect that they do those very same things because you've got to find the outlet because
Right.
this film Stomach It is really a metaphor for all of the people out there who deal with trauma on a daily basis. It's like you've said
Right.
before, it was the EMTs, it's the doctors, it's nurses who work in the ER, it's police officers who are working in very tough crime ridden neighborhoods. And the big question for all of them is how do they cope with daily trauma, and do they find outlets to release it, or do they just hold it in and try to put it in a compartment and ignore it?
Right.
Exactly.
It's interesting because some of the crime scene cleaners I spoke to, I can't remember if it was the one in Louisiana, but they spoke about how their companies offer therapy to their cleaners, and that's obviously just a therapeutic process for them. And I mean, I think that's something that I feel like, you know, EMTs, crime scene cleaners, crime scene investigators, police, surgeons. I think that would just be a great outlet. Just for people like that, just because, again, like you said, you're experiencing and dealing with so much trauma on a daily basis. So it's like, how do you cope with that in the most healthy way possible? Yeah.
Yeah, my father would tell me. He said the worst smell in the world was a burn victim.
Right.
He said it is something you will never get out of you, and it was
Right.
something that you'll always remember.
Right.
And of course, he said the same thing about if they were called back in the day, if they had a call and they had to pick up someone who had died, but they weren't found till a long time.
Hmm.
So they were they were decomposed in that
Yeah.
state. And he said, even that you'll never forget. And but yeah, I mean, he was no different than the rest of them. Would never talk about it.
Right.
And of course, when I was a kid growing up, I'd never put two and two together because he saw things that I didn't see, but he would always say something that alluded to something that he had picked up. Like, so like I think I was a teenager, and you have your car, and you put it up on jack stands, and you're going to change your own oil. And he would always say, "You make sure that's secure," because I remember picking up a guy where the car landed on top of him. And so he would only say stuff like that. And then you got the picture of like, okay, better be careful because he's basically saying, don't get hurt.
Right.
So when I saw this film, it was very interesting. But here's the other thing, and you brought this up in the very beginning of the interview, and I appreciate it because I hope a lot of people will start to learn this. There is a body mind connection in this film.
Yeah.
It is brain to stomach, and it's stomach to brain. And of course, a lot of people don't know that the connection is actually the vagus nerve, and because the highest concentration of nerves in the body is in the intestinal tract, and anytime we become emotional, become under stress, we feel that just like Joel did in the movie. He felt it in his stomach. He felt that rumbling, but it was also coming from the fact of what was uh, touching his emotional psyche and the thoughts in his head. And so I have to give you 5 stars for that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Something I will say, you were talking about just the smell of death before. When I spoke to crime scene cleaners, I heard similar anecdotes where this smell of a decomposed body is this worst smell that they had ever smelled in their entire lives. And how one of the crime scene cleaners I spoke to was off the job. It was just walking around. I forgot what town he was in. Was just walking around. He walked by an alley and he smelled something, and immediately he knew it was a body that had been started to decompose, and he immediately called the police. But it was kind of that thing where it's like, once, like you said, once you smell that, you're never going to forget it for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I actually had this conversation with my wife because I believe back in the mid 1980s there was a plane crash in Dallas, Texas, a passenger plane, and when it missed the runway, and she was there. She was actually there with her aunt because her aunt worked for the airlines. And she goes, "You walked outside, and that's all you smelled because you could smell the bodies because of the fire."
Right.
And she goes, "And you'll never forget it." And I mean, for you, Joel, how did you? I mean, mentally preparing for a role like this and walking into these multiple scenes where there's nothing but blood. I mean, what space did you put yourself in?
You know, the it all felt like it came together when we were on set in costume. Um, and I mean, the room itself was very oppressive. I mean, it didn't take much faking to make that apartment feel like an eerie place to be in. Um, I think the biggest thing is that it felt safe being on set. I felt like I knew Peter, I knew the cast. I'd worked with Emily before as well, and I think with those kind of roles, you can go so much deeper if you feel just like I am safe. I told Peter beforehand, listen, I want to be in a state of spontaneity with the acting. And with that comes sometimes I might do a take and we might go, okay, that was garbage. And that's okay. I just want you to know I could go middle of the road safe and every take will be decent, or I can really just let impulses take over and some takes will feel not right, but some might be gold. You know what I mean? And it's something I kind of realized from just through the years acting, that when I give myself that, and Peter was totally down with that. When I give permission to just explore, then yeah, it's more fun. It's weird to say fun, but yeah, I mean, it's a weird sort of thing where you're going to these dark places, but you have to have a certain level of relaxation and and a sense of trust to be able to go there. And so I felt that. And then I think the rest of it just came from the deep conversations we had, a lot of journaling I did, a lot of daydreaming. I've been taught as far as emotional getting to emotional places. I don't usually do what you were referring to earlier, emotional recall, as much for me personally. But what I like to do is I use an as if, I use an imaginary circumstance from my real life that can start to get me into that world. Um, and then I, it's almost like duct tape it to Joel and his circumstance. It's kind of just a way into the neighborhood of that emotional space. So yeah, I did some of that, and then it just kind of was a very collaborative, fun, creative environment.
You know, when I watched this film, and tell you the truth, I think one of my favorite scenes is when you are inside the cleanup truck.
Mm,
There's something about that scene because you're like, okay, I finished this job. I'm going to go home. And
Yeah.
then the
mhm,
phone rings.
Yeah.
And it's like, nope, you're not going to escape this. It's
mhm.
just going to be piled on top of you again and again to the point to where the look on your face in that scene is like, I'm never going to get away from this.
Yeah.
And then that's when it really becomes at that moment, I'm never going to escape this. This is, I mean, because in a way, you're doing the job, but your psyche's trying to find a way to escape at the same time, and you can't because it's all around you.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
one of my very, very close friends was the late Herschel Gordon Lewis, who is known as the godfather of gore. And if he would have seen this film, he would have been proud.
Oh wow.
Wow,
Saying that.
that's great. That's amazing.
Because especially, and we've got to talk about the special effects here, okay?
Oh yeah.
Because I was on set with Herschel many years ago, and so I kind of understand about the blood and making things look, in his mind, gory. But you had a little bit of that in this film as well. So, who did the special effects in the film, and how long did it take to plan them all before actually shooting it?
So my producer and I, like the first meeting that my producer Tori and I had, one of the first things I said was, I want to find a practical effects artist for this project because if we don't, the crime scenes that we're trying to stage aren't going to feel right. The the pulsating stomach, the where when his stomach is pulsating, that's not going to feel right. So we found this special effects makeup artist named Michael Dinetz. He's worked on a lot of different things. I think the first time that my producer and I went to his studio, which is based out of his garage in Pasadena, he was working on, I think, the new live action Lilo and Stitch movie. But we go into his garage and there's, fake, obviously fake, severed limbs, uh, something from an alien tentacles. I think there was a head. I think there was a zombie baby, and I was like, okay, this is
It's a
this
weird
is
garage.
this is a weird garage, but this feels like the right guy. And I was really influenced by 80s practical effects. Like my favorite movie of all time is Nightmare on Elm Street. So Nightmare on Elm Street was a big influence on this. And also just, it's interesting. I was writing the script and I found myself running into the issue of this is too internal. The stomach sounds, doing creepy stomach sounds is only gonna get us so far. So I had that in the back of my mind, and then I saw Videodrome, Cronenberg's Videodrome, and that made me really realize I should go down more of the body horror, realm. And then I saw The Fly, and then I saw Altered States. I really started to go down the body horror kind of realm, and I think it really works for this film because all the body horror is meant to externalize this very internal pain that Joel has. So yeah, the practical effects that we did were incredibly challenging to pull off. Specifically, I mean, I'll talk about a couple of them. The footstep sequence, which actually, my practical effects artist, I spoke about it with him, and essentially, crime scene cleaners use a 12% hydrogen peroxide spray to detect and disinfect blood. And when it detects blood, it foams up. So that's why in the film, when the character is spraying blood, it foams up. And I wanted there to be a sequence where the character is spraying down, a bloody mattress, and then gets down to the carpet, and this, foamy footprint arises, but we don't see any blood. And I had no idea how to do that. My Michael spoke to a chemist friend of his. His chemist friend had an idea. We tried that idea. It didn't work at all. So I was like, okay, if a chemist doesn't know how to pull this off, then I didn't do great in chemistry in school. I'm not going to be able to figure this out. And we were having a crew Zoom call about going down the VFX route for that footstep sequence, which I personally did not want to do at all, because everything in this film is practical. And we were talking about it, and in the background, my production designer's boyfriend named JP was like a really clever guy. He was like, I feel like I can figure this out. So he went and experimented and utilized this chemical reaction called elephant toothpaste, which is essentially, you can look it up on YouTube. It's like sometimes people fill up like pools of this stuff. It's essentially, um, it's this yeasty, watery solution that sometimes people combine with food coloring. And when it reacts to hydrogen peroxide, and also I believe dish soap and sugar, when that reacts to the kind of yeast, it has this very foamy reaction, because the hydrogen peroxide is breaking down the I think the catalyst or the enzymes in the yeast, essentially. So for that sequence, essentially what my production designer's boyfriend figured out, who worked on our team, was he stepped his foot in this yeasty, watery solution all over the carpet, and when we would spray it, it looked like this foamy footprint would arise. So that took about 6 months to figure out how to do. I am very grateful that he figured that out. Another really tough one to figure out how to do was the shot where Joel is in the foreground, and in the background the mattress is protruding out. That was definitely inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street. But I really wanted to do this shot. Some people in the crew were questioning if it was necessary or if we had the time for it, but I just really wanted to do it. So I spoke to Michael again about this, and I thought of this idea after I had hired him, so he didn't have the time to, create what we needed to for that. So he kind of told me how I could go about it. So I hired a carpenter who made a 3D wooden stomach, and we cut a hole in a mattress topper, and we puppeteered it through that. And there was a fitted sheet on top, and we put some red light underneath, and it just looked like this kind of intestinal protruding, thing that's just
It did.
going up. Yeah. And that was interesting, because we did 3 takes of that, and the first 2 takes really did not work because there was too much red light, and you very clearly saw the wooden stomach, so it kind of was akin to like a jack-o'-lantern, so it was very campy and didn't work. And the other issue was when he's puppeteering it, and when he would go down, you would clearly see that we had cut a hole in the mattress topper, so immediately it just felt fake. So I didn't know this until I think the day after, but for the 3rd take, on the left-hand side of the mattress was our production designer, Layla, who was absolutely amazing. And on the right side was our second AC, Malia. And essentially what happened was, when he brought the stomach down, they held the sheet taut, so it didn't look like, so you couldn't see the hole, essentially, so it wasn't dipping down. And when we got that was just kind of like a, oh, yes, that was one of those moments. But it was really kind of almost scary, some of the practical effects, because we only had the time and money to do most of these shots once. So the footstep sequence, we did that in 1 take. And yeah, I'm trying to think of the other practical effects was so we also used what's called air bladder, which is essentially it's used in a lot of 80s horror, and essentially it's a latex balloon, and when you inflate it, it can look like skin is pulsating. I think it was first used in The Exorcist when Linda Blair's neck is throbbing. Um, so I had seen that in some Cronenberg movies, and again, that was another way I could visualize stomach pain, was just it literally looking like his stomach is protruding out. So I had Michael create that was one of the first things we talked about, was just creating a stomach bladder, so it looks like Joel's stomach is trying to, essentially escape. So we did there's three shots of that, and each one kind of gets more intensified. That was challenging because we only had Michael on set for one day, so we had shot, for example, we had already shot the van scene, but we needed to go back to the van scene just to do the close up of the stomach bladder. So that was a little bit challenging for the continuity of that. But you know, the most challenging sequence by far for this whole film, the most challenging sequence I've ever directed by far, is the final sequence where he's ripping open the mattress. Because I had an idea of what I wanted to do with that sequence. I wanted it to feel, I wanted it to visually look very, very intestinal. I wanted it to look gooey, put some vomit in there, some blood. But the challenging thing was, okay, mattresses are expensive, so we couldn't totally experiment with it a lot beforehand. So what I didn't realize is how fast Jon was going to be ripping through it. So because of that, I had to in the moment be like, more vomit, more goo, more blood, more bile, like all these different things, and having to figure out in the moment what I needed visually to communicate this kind of intestinal mattress was incredibly challenging. And it's interesting. So the over the shoulder coverage was Brenton, our first AD, because he stabs the mattress and we didn't want Jon to do that. And that was oh my God, I think that was a 20-minute take, because again, I was literally trying to figure out what we needed visually to communicate this whole intestinal thing. And he told me afterwards that that was the hottest he's ever been in his entire life, because he was in a hazmat suit. It was the hottest weekend in LA of 2023. So it was probably 100 degrees in this apartment, and plus a hazmat suit. I can't imagine how hot that was, but I know Jon can attest to the same thing. The other interesting thing I forgot to mention about this location is that prior productions had come into this set, and set sinks, plumbing, it doesn't work, but prior productions had come in and had poured food and stuff down the sink, and it was the hottest weekend of the year, so everything that was in there was starting to boil, essentially. So this smell was coming up, and it was the worst smell I've ever smelled in my entire life.
It smelled like a crime scene.
It smelled like a crime
I
scene.
was
It really
about to
did.
say, you had
That's
realism.
it.
Yeah, it smelled like
It
a
really
crime
did.
scene. It really, really did. It was truly horrendous. I was really stressed out on prep day, but we ended up figuring it out. But we had to kind of, throughout the 3 days of shooting, we had to kind of cover it up every now and then. But to go back to the practical effects, the other two big ones was the prosthetic wound for the end when he's in front of the mirror, just that wound. And that was a happy accident happened, which is that on the day that that prosthetic was applied to Jon's abdomen, when I saw it applied, I realized something, which is that when Jon was breathing out, it looked like the wound was breathing as well. And that was just a happy accident that wasn't planned.
Or
But when
opening.
was opening, yes, it looked like it was expanding, and that felt very, very visceral and very much akin to body horror. So when we did those two shots with that prosthetic wound, I told Jon to really just breathe out as much as he could so that wound could expand as much as possible. And kind of the big other practical effect, this was also one of the first things I talked to Michael about, was creating a stomach. Before we hired him, I had bought a stomach prop online. And when I spoke to Michael about this, he was like, okay, but we can't fill that up with bile. And I was like, okay, you're right. So he created a stomach for us, and I'm forgetting what the two, I think, blanking on what those two ends of the stomach are called, but we were able to fill it up. It was hollow, so we could fill it up with bile. So when John, picks it up, he could squeeze it and bile would just ooze out. So that was great and very visceral.
Yeah,
But
because when I looked at it, because I was sitting there thinking, okay, one one end of it is the connection to the esophagus.
right,
The other end, I kept thinking because I kept looking at it, I'm like, okay, it's not pointing downward because if it was pointing downward, it would have been the ileum. And so I'm
okay,
thinking, well, maybe it was connected from the liver or pancreas, which is why it's creating where. So, like if someone eats fat, bile is released to help
right,
digest that fat. So that I got because I thought it was it was so cool looking that in that very scene, I was like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Joel is literally holding onto his emotions.
for
Hmm.
sure. That was
You got it.
exactly what it was.
That's
Yeah.
how I interpreted it because, and I watched this. I watched that scene a few times because I was like, okay, I want to make sure I get this right because I kept looking at it because Peter, you were so subtle in a lot of the storytelling in this film, which is why it makes this film so good to watch. You also paid a little homage to the fact of the 80s and 90s because the film the film has that type of look mostly because of the crime scenes.
Right.
And then you just brought up the fact that here is this room. It's hotter than hell in there. The sink doesn't actually work. So for you, John, did all of those elements add more for your acting just to pour out into that scene?
Yeah, I think so. I think any of the any of those things ended up being blessings more than curses. Because how uncomfortable would you be if you're actually there and you're Joel? So any of that, during breaks was obnoxious, but during actual filming, just fed it. You know.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't imagine if the room was a nice 70 degrees and it smelled like
Yeah.
lavender. I just don't think that would pull out the elements in
Right.
the acting that you brought forth to
Right.
make it
Right.
work. So
Yeah.
sometimes, like you said, Peter, there are happy accidents when
Yeah.
filming, or these little miracles that add to the whole production. And I can't
Right.
believe that you pulled this off in 3 days.
Yeah, I am also amazed we pulled it off. We planned as possible. We had a full prep day to pre-light it and to for our production designer and art team to set dress the place. We filmed it all in one location in Alhambra. It's this apartment set. So we got to film the van scene in their kind of like warehouse area, staged different crime scenes to make it look like different locations. But it was just really, really ideal because of that. Um, yeah, the other thing I will say, one other thing I forgot to mention about the practical effects when I was talking about the elephant toothpaste was when that wine glass reaction happens, that's also elephant toothpaste. So it's kind of going into that. I think the character is kind of, he's obviously thrown out the final meal, but I think there's this feeling in him that he thinks there's blood in this wine glass. So that's what incites him to pour it in. So that reaction was also elephant toothpaste. So elephant toothpaste was, yeah, for the footstep sequence and for that kind of just really crazy reaction that happens.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that when I was watching that one scene. I'm thinking, now I know that's not Coca-Cola and Mentos, so how did they pull that off? So,
Yeah,
because because you see all of these chemical reactions when you're watching Instagram or TikTok, and I'm sitting there
Yeah.
going, all right, how did
Which
they do it?
one?
Because it was a very cool effect because when the reaction happened, it was ongoing. It just kept
Hmm.
going, which really plays in to the
Yeah.
whole scene. And I have to ask, are there any thoughts of ever creating Stomach It as a feature film?
it's interesting. People have asked me that, and I have in the last year I have tried. I've spent a lot of time trying to think about that, and I the reason that I haven't thought of a story for that is I don't know if I want to explore more of this character's backstory. I think you seem to totally understand, for example, who this character is and where he's come from, and that's kind of the struggle that I had with trying to expand it into a feature was just kind of, yeah, that notion. And John and I have spoken about it a little bit, but as of now, yeah, I always kind of, thought of it as a contained short film. Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not
Well,
down.
I think there's a better idea because I've
Okay.
seen short films where the writer directors will think and say, "Well, I'm looking at this as a possible feature," and then I'm
Hmm.
looking at the short films and I'm like, "No, I'd go after a streaming series, and I would do a streaming series on Stomach It for one big reason." You're able to place Joel in various crime scenes, but then there's the life outside of the job.
Hmm.
Then you have other characters that are also crime scene cleaners, where you have you maybe have a couple that are so hardened to the
Yeah.
effect that it's just like, whatever. Or you'd have one that was so seasoned at his job, he sees Joel basically getting queasy or not even want to show up. He's like,
Right.
dude, forget about it. I got this one. And it's just a
Right.
horrific freaking scene. And the guy's
Hmm.
just like, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So to me, this streaming idea based on this creates multiple characters. It also creates, I guess, a better backstory for Joel because you start off with an innocence that you then taint with this job.
Right. That's interesting. It's interesting you bring that up because we barely see Joel's partner in this. We only see him in the only
Hmm.
actually opening two crime scenes, and then his short little phone conversation. But that was kind of what I was thinking about with that partner character was, Joel picks up the toy horse in the first crime scene, and then the partner grabs it from him, or Joel in the decomposition scene, which is the following one. Joel tries to turn the the drawing around on the fridge, and his partner stops him. So it's very much that idea that you spoke of, which is, his partner is definitely this type of person that's more hardened and is kind of like, why are you turning things around? Let's finish this job and let's move on. That's kind of what John and I spoke about with that character. And this was cut from the film, but you can actually see this in the wide shot. There's two certificates of appreciation. There's a close up of Joel's, but that we see for a couple of seconds. But next to his is Ian's certificate of appreciation, which is Joel's partner, and surrounded by the certificate of appreciation is a bunch of family photos, and there's nothing around Joel's. And that was kind of just trying to show the notion of his partner is hardened, but it just views this as, and definitely also emotionally detaches, but is able to do this job while also maintaining a family life. And I think that Joel's character is so absorbed and stuck in this job that I definitely view this guy as someone who doesn't have a significant other. We talked about Joel having a mother, but definitely just does not have the same type of social life that his partner has.
Yeah, because to me, part of the backstory would be it's not like you would have Joel fill out an application and
Yeah.
get a job. It's more of he's out of a job. And then a friend of his or an acquaintance goes, "Hey man, so and so's looking for a cleaner," and that's all he says. He doesn't say it's a crime scene cleaner. He just says a cleaner, and he's like, "Yeah, I can clean. I can earn a few bucks doing that until I can finally get my life where I think of where I want to go." And then it just starts from there, and then the horror sets in. So
That's
yeah, I
interesting.
could see this going a million different ways because this is the type of character to where you can see the light, you can see the darkness, and then you can see the struggle between them
Hmm.
both.
Exactly.
So this film, I loved it. Um, my own director, I told him, I said, I got to send you the screener. This is up your alley because he is a horror freak. And of course, it was funny when you said Elm Street because that's his favorite horror film. And I'm going to tell him. I said, "You've got to watch this." I said, "You're gonna get it, just like I did." But when you've screened this film, what has been the audience's reaction to it?
Um, well, so Screamfest last night was the biggest, screening we've had, just in terms of audience and also the screen. I think people are completely viscerally grossed out, but also moved by just the emotion in it. And like you said, this stomach is supposed to represent his, emotions, and I think people can really understand and relate to that. Yeah, and it's interesting that when my producer Tori first read it, it really resonated with him because he has anxiety, as do I, and he was just communicating to me that when he's anxious, he feels it in his stomach. So I think that people also can resonate with it in that way. As well as just I feel like other people who have jobs that they just really don't like, and I feel like even if they're not a crime cleaner or a first responder, I think they can kind of relate to that, as well as just sometimes you're just in a really crappy job and you're in the office and you just want to
Mhm.
rip your stomach out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
been there, done that. And ladies and gentlemen, the main character in Stomach It is Joel, played by Jon Lee Richardson. Fixates on objects left behind by the deceased, such as a toy horse at an accidental shooting or a colorful toy at an overdose. But Joel tries to detach by turning photos around, disposing of final meals, covering photos on mirrors, and covering personal objects like stuffed animals, but it doesn't work. Joel has an incredibly difficult time trying to digest his trauma. Now, Stomach It explores what happens when a sensitive soul struggles to cope with experiencing trauma on a daily basis. Emotions take residence within our physical selves, growing and rotting when not released, acting like a ticking time bomb. It acts like the most fundamental of human questions. Do we have the guts to face our problems straight on? Or do we let them fester until they become something increasingly monstrous? Well, I want to thank you, Peter and John, for joining me today to talk about this incredible film, Stomach It.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to
Thank
speak
you.
with
It's
you.
it's been great to talk about it with you.
No, I really
You're
enjoyed
very, very welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, if you ever get the chance, and that chance will be coming, to watch Stomach It, you've got to sit down and I guess I hate to say the word to absorb, but you have to absorb this film, absorb the storyline to really get its true meaning. Yes, there is a brain and stomach connection, and Peter and John bring it to life. So I want to thank all of you for watching, and I'll either see you at the movies or from the red carpet.